Hi guys, tonight we wake together before dawn, before the idea of morning makes any sense at all. You are lying still, half wrapped in blankets that already feel thinner than they did yesterday, listening to a sound that has no clear edge. It is not quite wind and not quite silence. It is the long, steady breathing of a blizzard that has been building through the night. Snow presses against the walls like a held breath. Somewhere outside, something loose knocks, once then stops. You probably will not survive this, not easily. Not without learning a few uncomfortable truths about sleep, cold and fear. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights and let the storm take over the room. You open your eyes to darkness that feels heavier than usual. The small window above you has vanished behind white, not frosted. Gone. Snow has filled the frame so completely that even moonlight cannot find its way through. The air smells sharp and clean, but also stale, as if the room has been holding its breath all night. You draw in a slow inhale and feel it scrape faintly at the back of your throat. This is January of 1879, though you do not know that yet in the way history will name it. To you, it is simply the worst winter you can remember. Later newspapers will call it the Great Blizzard. Some will say it came without warning. Others will insist the signs were there if anyone had been listening. Modern meteorologists would note the sudden collision of Arctic air with the warmer plains weather as a textbook set up for disaster. But right now, lying where you are, the science does not matter. What matters is whether you can sleep at all. You shift slightly and feel the mattress complain beneath you. It is not really a mattress, more a stuffed sack, uneven and lumpy, filled with whatever could be spared. Straw, old cloth, maybe bits of corn husk. Each movement releases a dry, dusty smell that mixes with wool and damp leather. Somewhere nearby, another person exhales slow and shallow, the sound carefully controlled to save heat. Sleep in a storm like this is not a thing you fall into. It is something you negotiate. You listen first. You learn the storm's rhythm, the way the wind rises, pauses, then throws itself again against the building. That sound is constant, like surf, except colder, sharper, with a faint hiss as snow scours wood. The building creaks not loudly, but often as if it is thinking very hard about staying upright. A mainstream historical fact settles quietly into the room with you. During this winter, temperatures across the northern plains plunged far below zero with wind chills that modern measurements would place at levels dangerous to exposed skin within minutes. People who had lived their entire lives on the frontier admitted later that they had never felt cold like this. It was not just uncomfortable, it was invasive. It entered clothing, walls and thoughts. You pull your coat tighter, even though you already slept in it. Many people did. Sleeping without clothing in winter was a luxury for houses with reliable heat. Out here you wear everything you own, arranging layers with care. Wool closest to the skin if possible. Cotton avoided when it can be because it traps moisture and then turns against you. This knowledge is not written down for you. It has been learned by cold hands and colder mornings. There is a small fire somewhere, maybe in a stove, maybe just embers now. You can smell it faintly, a smoky sweetness that promises warmth, but also danger. People knew even then that fires could kill quietly in sealed spaces. Carbon monoxide did not have its modern name yet, but the effects were familiar. Dizziness, sleep that went too deep. Families learned to let fires die down at night, choosing cold over never waking at all. A quirky tidbit drifts through your half-awareness. Some frontier families slept with bricks heated in the fire and wrapped in cloth placed near feet or tucked along the spine. Others used metal tools, even flat irons warmed, and then buried in bedding. It was a fragile warmth, brief and fading, but sometimes those few minutes were enough to let exhaustion pull you under. You close your eyes not because you feel safe, but because keeping them open takes energy. Sleep comes in thin layers. You hover just beneath waking alert to every change in sound. When the wind shifts, you tense. When it pauses, you worry. Silence is not comforting here. Silence might mean the storm has found a new angle, a new weakness. Historians still argue whether the true danger of this blizzard was its suddenness or its duration. Some accounts emphasize how quickly temperatures dropped, catching people outdoors without shelter. Others point to the relentless days that followed when snow blocked doors, buried livestock, and turned survival into a slow calculation. Lying here, you suspect it is both, the shock and the waiting. Your breathing becomes a thing you manage. Inhale through the nose to warm the air. Exhale slowly, lips barely parted. Too fast and you lose heat. Too shallow and panic creeps in. You focus on the sound of your own breath, letting it anchor you. Outside, the storm continues its work, reshaping the land, while you lie still trying not to waste warmth on unnecessary movement. Somewhere a horse stamps. The sound is muffled but distinct. Animals sleep standing up often, conserving energy heads. Low bodies turned away from the wind. You take comfort in knowing they are still there. Horses, cattle, even chickens often slept closer to people during storms like this. Their shared body heat, a quiet bargain between species. You think about mourning, but only abstractly. Mourning is a concept, not a promise. Light may come without warmth. Day may change nothing at all. For now there is only this narrow present, this pocket of darkness and cold and listening. Your thoughts slow stretching like taffy. Images drift in and out. Snow piling against fences. A road disappearing under drifts. The feel of ice forming along the edge of your blanket where breath meets fabric. Each image arrives softly, then dissolves before it can sharpen into fear. You remind yourself to stay still. Stillness saves heat. It also saves sleep, such as it is. You let your mind loosen its grip just a little, trusting that the part of you trained by necessity will wake you if something goes wrong. The storm does not care if you sleep. It will keep moving regardless. But here in this moment, you allow your eyelids to rest, your muscles to soften, your breath to find its careful rhythm. You're not fully asleep, not yet. You're practicing for it, learning how to rest inside danger, learning how people once learned to sleep when the world outside turned lethal. You drift back toward awareness, not because you feel rested, but because the sound has changed. It is subtle the way a seasoned sleeper notices a difference without opening their eyes. The wind has shifted direction. Instead of pressing evenly against the walls, it now whistles through a seam, somewhere a thin, high note threading through the deeper roar. You hold still, listening, measuring what that change might mean. The building answers with a soft pop as wood contracts. Cold tightens everything. Nails strain, boards complain. These sounds would be unsettling on an ordinary night. Tonight they are simply information. You catalogue them the way you might count breaths. Nothing has failed yet. Somewhere far away beyond the reach of your hearing rail lines sit frozen and useless. Telegraph wires hum faintly iced over, carrying signals that no longer connect to anything meaningful. A mainstream historical fact slides into your thoughts like a quieter side. During the blizzard of 1879, railroads across the Midwest and Great Plains were paralyzed for days, sometimes weeks. Trains stalled in open country. Stations lost contact with one another. For communities that depended on those lines for news supplies and reassurance, the silence was its own kind of threat. You imagine the telegraph offices, small rooms with iron stoves and ticking instruments. Operators tapping out messages that never arrive. Clicks going unanswered. It is a strange comfort knowing that even the fast technologies of the time have been humbled by the same cold pressing against your walls. Your body shifts before you can stop it, a reflexive adjustment. The blanket slides slightly, exposing a strip of wrist. The cold finds it instantly sharp as a bite. You tuck it back in with care, moving slowly to avoid pumping warm air out of your little pocket. People learned early that thrashing in bed was the enemy. Stillness was insulation. Sleep does not deepen. It thins again, turning into a long, watchful rest. You're not on guard for enemies or animals. You're watching the weather itself as if it might suddenly decide to notice you. Outside, snow piles higher against the door. You know this without seeing it. The sound changes as drifts form, the wind losing some of its edge, as the snow creates new shapes, new barriers. In the morning opening, that door will be work. Shovels may be buried, hands will numb quickly, but morning is still far away. A quirky detail surfaces from the collective memory of the plains. Some settlers kept ropes tied from house to barn, simple lines, stretched tight so they could find their way through whiteouts without losing direction. In storms like this, one visibility dropped so completely that people could become lost within a few steps of their own doors. Those ropes saved lives, humble inventions that turned chaos into a narrow, navigable path. You picture those ropes now vibrating faintly under the weight of snow, leading nowhere and everywhere at once. You're grateful to be indoors, even in a place that barely deserves the name. The cold seeps deeper. It's not content with skin. It presses inward, making joints ache, slowing thought. You become aware of your toes, then your knees, then the small of your back. Each area announces itself in turn. You respond by curling slightly, drawing yourself into a tighter shape. Humans are good at this, folding inward when the world becomes too large and too hostile. There is a smell of damp wool and something faintly sour. It might be old leather. It might be fear. In close quarters, emotions have scents. Anxiety sharpens the air. Calm softens it. You aim for the latter, even if it feels like pretending. Historians still debate whether people truly understood the scale of the coming disaster in those early hours. Some diaries suggest a sense of unease, a recognition that this storm was different. Others read as stubbornly ordinary, focused on chores and routines until cold made those routines impossible. Lying here half awake, you suspect that understanding comes later. In the moment, there is only adaptation. Your thoughts wander to the idea of connection. Somewhere someone else is awake for the same reasons you are. A family huddled in a sod house. A cowboy trapped in a line shack. A railroad worker stranded between stations. You're all listening to the same storm translated through different walls. Sleep arrives in short pulses. You slip under for a few minutes, then surface again when the wind howls or a body nearby shifts. Each return to consciousness feels heavier. Muscles protest. Eyes burn faintly. This is the tax the storm collects. Not just heat, but rest. You recall stories told later of people who slept too deeply and never woke. Frostbite creeping unnoticed. Breath slowing beyond recovery. It's hard to separate truth from fear in these tales. The line between cautionary story and documented event blurs over time. Still, the knowledge shapes behaviour. You stay just this side of true sleep, alert enough to feel pain, alert enough to adjust. Outside, the wind carries snow in horizontal sheets. If you could see it, it would look unreal, like the world turned sideways. Sound behaves strangely in such conditions. Everything is muffled and amplified at once. Close noises are sharp, distant ones vanish. You listen for animals again. A low sound reaches you. Maybe cattle huddled somewhere breathing steam into the dark. Livestock losses during this winter will be enormous, a fact that future historians will quantify in staggering numbers. Right now, those animals are just another presence, another reason the night feels crowded even in isolation. Your breath fogs the air briefly before dissolving. You watch it fascinated despite yourself. Each exhale is proof of life, of warmth still being produced. You time your breathing with someone else's sinking unconsciously. Shared rhythms calm the body. They make the space feel less exposed. The storm continues its work on the outside world, but inside time stretches and thins. Minutes lose their shape. You stop counting them. You focus instead on sensations, the weight of blankets, the steady ache in your shoulders, The sound of wind passing over snow, a sound like distant surf under ice. Eventually, without ceremony, you slip into a deeper rest. Not safe, not comfortable, but sufficient. Your body takes what it can get. The storm does not pause to acknowledge this small victory. It keeps moving indifferent, relentless, while you sleep lightly, waiting for whatever comes next. You wake again with the sense that the land itself is holding its breath. The storm has not ended, but something about it feels heavier now, as if the plains beyond the walls have gone still under the weight of snow. The wind is lower, more constant, less playful. It no longer throws itself at the building. It leans. That steady pressure seeps into your thoughts, making it harder to imagine movement at all. This is cattle country, even if you cannot see it. Miles of open range stretch out in every direction, fences, buried landmarks erased. Somewhere beneath the snow, thousands of animals stand with their backs to the windheads, down conserving energy in the same way you are. You feel a strange kinship with them. Survival tonight is not about strength, it is about patience. A plain historical truth moves quietly through the dark. The winter of 1879 devastated the cattle industry on the northern plains. Herds that had thrived during mild seasons were unprepared for sustained cold and deep snow. Ranchers later estimated losses in the hundreds of thousands. But here now, none of that has numbers yet. There are only shapes in the storm and the sound of breathing animal and human blending together. You imagine the cattle drifting before the blizzard, driven by instinct and fear. Snow builds on their backs, insulating at first, then weighing them down. Those that stop moving too long risk never moving again. It's not cruelty that kills them. It is exhaustion paired with cold. You understand this more clearly than you want to. Inside, someone stirs and coughs softly, careful not to waste breath. The sound feels loud in the quiet room. Even small noises carry weight when everything else has been smothered. You adjust your position again, pressing your knees closer to your chest. Your joints ache with a dull persistence, like a reminder that time is passing whether you track it or not. Sleep refuses to become continuous. Instead, it comes in overlapping fragments. A memory here, a sound there, a half-dream that dissolves as soon as it forms. You're aware dimly that this kind of rest is not restorative, it is maintenance. It keeps you from breaking down entirely. A curious detail drifts into your thoughts, something you heard once around a stove on a calmer night. Some ranch hands believe that cattle facing east weathered storms better, turning away from the worst of the prevailing winds. Whether true or not, men would sometimes risk short trips outside during lulls to reposition herds, trusting instinct and tradition over comfort. You picture those figures now bent low against the snow, disappearing and reappearing like ghosts. The air inside grows stale. Someone cracks a door briefly, just enough to exchange it for fresher cold. The temperature drops instantly sharp and biting, but the relief is real. Stale air makes you drowsy in a dangerous way. Fresh cold hurts, but it keeps the mind clear. The door closes again and the room settles back into its uneasy balance. You focus on your senses to keep calm. The smell of wool, the faint metallic tang of cold, the texture of your coat collar against your cheek, rough but familiar. You listen to the building, learning its language. A creak here means nothing. A crack would mean everything. Scholars still disagree on how much warning people truly had before the worst of the blizzard struck. Some argue that sudden temperature drops were common enough on the plains that they failed to raise alarm. Others suggest that communication breakdowns played a crucial role, with distant weather reports never reaching isolated communities. Lying here, you feel how easy it is to miss a turning point when survival depends on focusing only on the next hour. The concept of community shifts in storms like this. It becomes less about choice and more about proximity. You share space, heat and silence with whoever happens to be near. Social boundaries soften. Class background and history matter less than body warmth and breathing. You're aware of this without naming it, sensing that the storm has temporarily rearranged the rules. Outside, snow continues to accumulate, smoothing the land into gentle shapes that hide danger beneath. Fence lines disappear. Creeks become indistinguishable from fields. Even experienced riders will struggle to read the terrain once the storm lifts. This knowledge hums faintly in your mind, adding weight to the darkness. Your eyelids droop again. You let them close, trusting that your body will wake you if it needs to. You drift into a dream where the plains stretch endlessly under a pale sky, cattle moving like dark islands in a white sea. There's no sound in the dream, only motion. When you wake again, the silence feels louder than any wind. Someone shifts closer, seeking shared warmth. You do not resist. Human heat is one of the few reliable resources left. You breathe in sync again, feeling the rise and fall beside you. It is oddly soothing, this borrowed rhythm, this reminder that you're not alone in the storm. Time becomes elastic. You cannot say how long you lie there, half dreaming, half listening. Minutes could be hours. The storm does not mark time for you. It erases it. You think briefly of the sun of warmth stored in memory rather than reality. That thought fades quickly. Dwelling on comfort you cannot reach only sharpens the cold. Eventually fatigue outweighs vigilance. Your muscles relax despite themselves. Your breathing deepens a fraction. You slip into another shallow sleep, aware on some level that this is not surrender but strategy. You rest because you must. The plains outside hold their breath, the cattle stand and wait, and you sleep, lightly balanced between endurance and exhaustion. The cold develops a personality sometime before true morning. You notice it as you lie there, wrapped tight, eyes closed but not fully gone. It is no longer just temperature, it is pressure and presence. The wind outside does not simply pass over the building now. It speaks through it. Each gap in the boards becomes a mouth, each corner a listening ear. You hear it first as a low moan, drawn out and patient. Then it sharpens, finding a loose board or a warped seam, turning into a thin whistle that cuts through everything else. It sounds almost intentional, as if the storm is testing the structure, learning how it was put together. The building answers in its own language, a series of slow groans and quick snaps. As wood flexes against cold, you remain very still. Stillness feels respectful somehow, as if movement might attract attention. Your body is a collection of small aches now, fingers stiff, toes numb in a way that is no longer painful, just distant. The cold has begun to claim territory. You remind yourself to wiggle your toes just barely enough to confirm they still belong to you. Breathing has become a conscious act. You draw air in, slowly letting it warm before it reaches your lungs. Each exhale fogs faintly a pale cloud that drifts upward and disappears into the darker air near the ceiling. You watch it with one eye open, tracking the shape until it fades. This small ritual keeps panic at bay. Accounts from the time describe wind speeds so strong that people later struggled to believe them. Snow was driven hard enough to strip exposed skin and work its way through layered clothing. The storm did not simply surround you, it infiltrated. You can feel that truth now, lying inside walls that were never meant to keep out something this determined. Someone nearby mutters in their sleep. Not words, just a sound, low and uneasy. Dreams are not kind tonight. When sleep does come, it brings fragments of fear, images of endless white, of walking and never arriving. You recognize this sensation. The mind rehearses danger when it cannot escape it. You shift your head slightly and the collar of your coat scrapes against your cheek. The fabric is stiff with cold. Clothing behaves differently at these temperatures. Wool loses its softness. Leather turns rigid. Even hair feels brittle. Everything becomes less forgiving. A lesser-known detail from this winter surfaces in your thoughts. People later recalled that sound travelled strangely during the blizzard. Voices seemed swallowed immediately. Shouts vanished into the wind. Bells and whistles lost their reach. The storm did not echo. It absorbed. Lying here listening to the wind work at the walls, you understand how isolating that must have felt outdoors. You imagine standing up just for a moment and immediately discard the idea. Heat drains upward. Rising would waste what little warmth you've built. You remain curled, conserving energy, letting your spine settle into the shape it has chosen for the night. The cold has found your nose. The tip tingles, then dulls. You tuck your face deeper into your scarf, breathing through fabric that smells faintly of smoke and sweat. It is not pleasant, but it is familiar. Familiarity has its own comfort. People who survived storms like this often spoke later about how the wind seemed to call their names. It is easy to dismiss that as exaggeration until you hear it yourself. The way the sound rises and falls can feel eerily intentional, like speech just beyond understanding. The brain looks for patterns even in chaos. Later interpretations differ on whether this personification of the storm helped or harmed those caught in it. Some argue that treating the weather as an adversary sharpened awareness and respect. Others suggest it fed fear and exhaustion. Here in the dark, it simply feels accurate. The storm feels alive. You notice the temperature inside has dropped another degree, not measured but felt. Someone must have let the fire go out completely. It was the right choice. The air feels cleaner now, sharper, less heavy. Cold clarity replaces warm drowsiness. You shiver once, a full-body tremor that rattles your teeth. Then it passes. You think of the people who tried to sleep alone during this storm. Line shacks miles from the nearest house. Dugouts half buried in snow. Wagons stopped mid-journey. Many did not make it through the night. Some were found later, curled exactly as they had lain down, as if sleep had claimed them gently. That gentleness is misleading. It hides how hard the body fights before it gives in. Your awareness turns inward again. Heartbeat steady if slow. Breath controlled. Muscles tense just enough to respond if needed. This is not rest as you know it in safer times. It is vigilance softened by fatigue. A small cracking sound makes your eyes snap open fully. Wood contracting again. Nothing more. You exhale slowly, realizing you've been holding your breath. Fear wastes oxygen. You let it go. There is a rhythm now to the storm and you have learned it. Long push, short lull, another push. You time your breathing to it matching the pattern without meaning to. When the wind eases, your shoulders drop. When it rises, they tense. The storm has trained you in a single night. Somewhere outside, snow shifts and settles a soft thump as a drift collapses against the wall. The sound is close. Very close. You picture the doorway disappearing completely, the world sealing you in. Strangely, the thought does not frighten you as much as it should. Being sealed in also means being sealed off, protected from the worst of the wind. You close your eyes again. The darkness behind them feels thicker than the room itself. Images drift in and out. A memory of warmth, a summer sky, grass moving instead of snow. These thoughts feel almost dangerous, like promises you cannot keep. You let them pass. Your body sinks deeper into stillness. The cold does not leave, but it becomes something you understand, something you can coexist with for now. You listen to the storm speak through the walls, through the cracks, through the night itself. You do not answer. You simply remain breathing, conserving, enduring, learning the voice of cold well enough to sleep beside it. By now, the idea of choice has narrowed to something almost theoretical. You're here because this place exists, not because it was selected with care. Shelter in a storm like this is less about quality and more about timing. Whoever reached walls first stayed alive longer. Whoever hesitated misjudged distance or trusted the sky. 1 hour too long often did not. You lie still and think about that for a moment, not with fear exactly, but with a sober clarity. This building, whether it is a farmhouse, a bunkhouse, or a rough outbuilding pressed into service, was never meant to face a blizzard of this scale. Its boards are thin, It seems imperfect, and yet it stands between you and open land that has become lethal. Records from the period describe people sleeping wherever they happened to be when the storm overtook them. Schools became dormitories. Churches filled with bodies laid shoulder to shoulder. General stores locked their doors and turned counters into beds. There was no ceremony to it. Space was claimed quickly without discussion because the cold made discussion unnecessary. You become aware of the floor beneath you, hard and unyielding. It presses through whatever padding has been gathered, reminding you that comfort was never part of the arrangement. You shift just enough to relieve pressure on one hip, then stop. Movement must always justify itself. A draft slides along the floor, colder than the air above. Cold sinks. You tuck your feet tighter, trying to keep them out of its reach. Someone nearby has done the same, drawing knees up, curling into the oldest human shape of protection. In this posture, bodies make sense. They conserve, they endure. There is a smell of earth here that suggests the building may be partially dug into the ground. Dugouts were common on the plains, simple shelters carved into hillsides roofed with sod and timber. They were dark, damp, and surprisingly warm compared to surface structures. People who slept in them during the storm often survived at higher rates, not because the dugouts were comfortable, but because the earth itself moderated the cold. You imagine the weight of soil overhead insulating, steady and different to wind. There is something comforting about that image, even if you're not in such a place yourself. A small sound startles you. Snow sliding from a roof. It scrapes, then drops with a muffled thud. The building shivers in response. You wait, counting heartbeats. Nothing else follows. The structure holds. Contemporary observers later noted how quickly people learned to trust imperfect shelter. Tents reinforced with snowbanks. Wagons tipped on their sides and buried to block the wind. Haystacks hollowed out and turned into temporary refuges. These were not solutions taught in manuals. They were improvised answers shaped by desperation and local knowledge. You think about those who chose wrong, who took shelter in shallow drawers that filled with drifting snow, who stopped moving too soon in open country. The storm punished hesitation more harshly than bad decisions made quickly. There is a subtle warmth where bodies press together, faint but real. Human heat accumulates slowly like savings. You feel it along your back, along your side. It does not make you comfortable, but it makes you less alone inside the cold. The air tastes dry and metallic. Your lips crack when you shift them. You resist the urge to lick them. Moisture freezes fast. You breathe through fabric again, letting it catch the worst of the chill. Later analysis has pointed out that many frontier buildings lacked proper insulation, not because people were careless, but because materials were scarce and time was limited. Settlers built fast with what they had, assuming winters would be manageable as they had been before. This storm punished that assumption without mercy. You adjust your hat lower over your ears. The felt is stiff now, its shape altered by cold. Hats were essential for sleep during winter trapping heat that would otherwise escape. You feel strangely grateful for this small thing, this circle of fabric, that keeps your thoughts from freezing. Sleep drifts closer again, heavier this time. Exhaustion has worn down some of your vigilance. You let it happen, knowing that fighting it would cost more energy than you can spare. You trust that your body will signal if something goes wrong. As you slip toward rest, you imagine the land outside reshaped beyond recognition. Trails gone, fence posts hidden, familiar paths erased. When morning eventually comes, it will reveal a world that must be learned again. For now, there is only this place chosen by chance and held by necessity. You lie still inside it, listening to the storm pass inches away, grateful, not for comfort, but for walls. Sleep takes you gently, not deep enough to trap you, just far enough to let the night move on without you for a while. When awareness returns, it does so quietly without urgency. You are not startled awake. You simply realize slowly that your body has shifted and that the world has not ended while you were gone. That feels like an accomplishment. Sleep such as it is has become a careful arrangement rather than an absence of consciousness. Your layers matter now more than anything else. Not the number of them, but how they sit against one another. Fabric against fabric traps air. Air becomes warmth. You adjust a sleeve where it is twisted, smoothing it flat so cold cannot sneak through the fold. This small act feels almost meditative, like aligning something that has drifted out of place. People of the time understood layering intuitively. Wool was prized not for softness, but for its ability to retain heat even when damp. Cotton, cheaper and more common, betrayed its wearers once moisture entered the equation. Hides, furs, patched coats passed down or traded all played their part. What you slept in was often everything you owned, stacked in deliberate order. You feel the weight of those layers pressing down, a gentle pressure that keeps you grounded. It is not luxurious, it is functional. Comfort is not softness tonight. Comfort is the absence of sharp pain, the reassurance that your skin remains intact. A faint itch forms along your shoulder where sweat has cooled. You resist scratching. Movement creates drafts. Drafts steal heat. You breathe through the sensation until it fades, replaced by numbness that feels safer. Some personal accounts from this winter describe people sewing clothing directly onto themselves during storms, repairing tears without removing garments. Needles push through fabric and skin warmed by the body. It sounds extreme until you imagine taking a coat off in this cold. Exposure even briefly could be fatal. You understand now why repairs happen this way. Your thoughts wander to the idea of luxury. Featherbeds existed in the 19th century, thick and warm, but they were rare on the frontier. Most slept on straw ticks, buffalo robes, or whatever padding could be found. Sleep was never about sinking into softness. It was about surviving until morning. You feel the unevenness beneath you again, a knot of stuffing pressing into your ribs. You shift just enough to redistribute weight, then stop. Every movement is measured. You have learned this rhythm well in a single night. The air inside has grown colder still, but the change is gradual enough that it does not shock. That is how cold works best. It creeps. It convinces you to accept more than you should. You remain alert to this, checking sensations like a quiet inventory. Fingers, toes, ears, nose. Everything still present, still reporting back. There is a faint sound of fabric rustling nearby as someone else makes a similar adjustment. No words are exchanged. Words waste heat. Shared understanding replaces conversation. In this space, silence is cooperation. Later writers would note that many who survived the blizzard did so by sleeping in short cycles, waking often to assess their bodies and surroundings. Continuous sleep was rare and risky. You're living that strategy now, even if you would not have named it before tonight. A small memory surfaces uninvited. A summer evening. Lighter clothing. The ease of movement. You let the thought pass without holding on to it. Nostalgia is dangerous and cold. It tempts you to relax too much, to imagine comfort when none exists. You focus instead on the present textures. The roughness of wool. The stiffness of leather. The way your breath warms the fabric near your mouth. These details anchor you. Outside, the storm continues, though it feels slightly different now. Less chaotic. More settled. Snow is piled high enough to blunt some of the wind's force. Drifts act as accidental insulation. The world reshapes itself in ways that sometimes help as much as they harm. You draw your knees in again, curling tighter. The posture feels natural, almost instinctive. Humans have slept this way for millennia long, before buildings and stoves. Your body remembers even if your mind has forgotten. Sleep approaches once more heavier but still cautious. You allow it, trusting the balance you have learned. Layers arranged, breath controlled, body folded inward. You rest not because you are comfortable, but because rest itself has become a survival skill. The storm does not recede. The cold does not loosen its grip. But here inside your careful arrangement of fabric and flesh, you find a narrow place where sleep can exist. You settle into it quietly, letting the night continue without your full attention for a little while longer. You become aware of the fire by noticing what it no longer does. There's no longer a pulse of warmth rising and falling, no gentle crackle, no shifting glow behind closed eyelids. The heat has thinned into memory, leaving only the faint smell of old smoke and ash. The room feels larger now, emptier, as if warmth had been holding its shape together. This is deliberate. Someone chose this. Keeping a fire burning through the night sounds comforting until you remember how air behaves in sealed spaces. Heat consumes oxygen. Smoke lingers. People of this time knew through hard experience that the safest fire at night was often no fire at all. Better to wake cold than not wake. You pull your coat tighter across your chest, compensating for what the fire no longer provides. The cold rushes in to fill the gap, decisive and quick. Your body answers with a shiver that travels from shoulders to knees, then settles into a steady tension. Shivering makes heat, but it also burns energy. You try to slow it, breathing deeper longer. Written recollections from survivors often mention this choice as one of the hardest. Letting a fire die goes against instinct. It feels like surrender. But the logic is sound. In storms like this, ventilation becomes guesswork. Chimneys clog with snow. Drafts reverse. Smoke sinks instead of rising. Many learn this lesson too late. You think about the stove if there is one blackened squat now cooling. Metal holds heat longer than flame, releasing it slowly, reluctantly. You press a foot closer, seeking that last trace, but the iron has already surrendered. It is just another cold object now. A faint headache hovers behind your eyes. Not sharp, not alarming, just enough to keep you alert. You're aware of how thin the margin is. Warmth too long and air grows dangerous. Cold too deep and the body begins to fail quietly. Sleep exists somewhere between those extremes, a narrow path you must stay on. There is a soft sound nearby, the brushing of fabric as someone adjusts a blanket. Another person has noticed the change too. No one comments. There's nothing to say that has not already been understood. One often overlooked practice from frontier winters involved banking fires heavily before sleep, then letting them die naturally. Ash would insulate embers, preserving just enough heat to revive the fire quickly at dawn without risking nighttime fumes. You imagine that pile of ash now dull and grey, holding yesterday's warmth like a secret. Your breath feels clearer now, colder but cleaner. Each inhale stings slightly, sharpening your focus. This clarity keeps you from sinking too far into sleep. It keeps you aware of your body's signals. Comfort would be dangerous right now. The cold creeps in around the edges of your thoughts. You notice how it changes perception. Time feels slower. Sounds stretch. The room seems to expand and contract with each breath. You are not afraid exactly, but you are alert in a way that leaves no room for distraction. Later analysis of storm deaths from this period suggests that many occurred not during the height of the blizzard, but during attempts to manage warmth afterward. Fires lit too aggressively. Exhaustion leading to poor decisions. The danger did not announce itself, it waited for fatigue to open the door. You keep your eyes closed, but you're not fully asleep. Images drift in and out, shallow and incomplete. A flicker of flame. A hand extended toward heat. You let these images pass without following them. You anchor yourself instead in physical sensations. The weight of your coat, the firmness of the floor, the slow rhythm of breath. The smell of smoke fades, gradually replaced by the cleaner scent of cold air and wool. It feels almost refreshing in a harsh way. You remind yourself that this discomfort is a sign of safety, not risk. Clean air means lungs working as they should. Your toes ache again, the cold finding them first. You flex them gently inside your boots, tiny movements that generate warmth without exposing skin. Boots stay on at night during storms like this. Laces loosened slightly to allow circulation but never removed. Bare feet would be unthinkable. A memory surfaces of someone telling you that cold is a thief. It steals sensation first, then judgment. You repeat that thought silently, using it as a guide. As long as you can feel discomfort, as long as you can think clearly, you're still ahead of it. Outside, the wind has shifted again. Without the fire's faint noise, you hear it more clearly. It slides along the walls now instead of striking them head on. Snow settles and resettles, a constant quiet rearranging. The storm is still there, but its voice has softened slightly. You allow your shoulders to drop a fraction, easing tension without fully relaxing. This balance feels familiar now. You have learned it quickly because you had to. Sleep under these conditions is not an escape. It is a controlled descent, shallow enough that you can climb back out at the first sign of trouble. Your breathing steadies, the headache recedes. The cold remains firm and present, but no longer advancing. You have reached a temporary equilibrium. The fire is gone, but its absence has created a different kind of safety. You drift again, not deeply, but enough to let the edges of the room blur. Thoughts slow, sensations soften without disappearing. Somewhere in that space between waking and sleep, you recognize a strange truth. Comfort would have made this harder. Discomfort keeps you alive. You rest there, balanced between cold and clarity, while the night continues its long work outside. The storm still owns the land, but inside this careful arrangement of choices you hold your ground, breathing clean air, waiting for whatever the next hours bring. Your breath becomes something you notice before anything else. Not because it is difficult, but because it behaves differently now. Each inhale feels sharper, colder, as if the air has been filed down to an edge. Each exhale leaves a brief cloud that hangs in front of your face before dissolving into the dark. You watch it without opening your eyes, fully tracking its shape until it disappears. This is how you learn that even breathing can wake you. When the air is cold enough, moisture turns against you. Warm breath meets freezing space and becomes frost. You feel it collecting along the edge of your scarf, stiffening the fabric. The spot near your mouth grows damp, then cool, then uncomfortably cold. If you let it build, that dampness will still heat from your skin. You adjust the scarf slightly, angling your breath to a drier section, careful not to expose your face. People who lived through winters like this often described waking because their breath had frozen their blankets. It sounds exaggerated until you experience it yourself. Fabric grows rigid. Movement makes a faint crackling sound. Moisture becomes ice inches from your skin. You understand now why sleepers learn to manage where and how they breathed. Your nose tingles again. The sensation is not painful, yet just insistent. You tuck your face deeper, letting the warmth of your breath circulate instead of escaping. Too much circulation makes the air stale. Too little freezes your skin. Everything is balance. A detail from survivor recollections comes to mind. Some people slept with a mitten or folded cloth held loosely over their mouths to catch moisture before it reached bedding. It was a simple trick passed quietly from one winter to the next. Those who knew it slept better. Those who did not learned quickly. You feel your lungs expand and contract, steady and calm. Panic would shorten the breath, speed it up, waste heat. You slow yourself, deliberately counting in your head. In, pause, out, pause. The rhythm settles your thoughts. The cold has reached your eyelashes. You feel a faint stiffness when you blink. Tiny crystals form where moisture gathers. You blink more slowly now, reducing friction. These are small adjustments, but they matter. They add up. There are stories from this blizzard of people waking with their hair frozen to walls or blankets, breath having turned to ice overnight. Whether every account is accurate is difficult to say. Memory shapes itself around trauma. Still, the physical possibility is undeniable. You feel it happening on a smaller scale right here. Your chest rises and falls under layers of cloth. The weight reassures you. It keeps the air close. It slows heat loss. You remind yourself not to pull the blankets too tight around your face. Air must still move. The temptation to seal yourself completely is strong but dangerous. Later assessments of winter survival on the plains emphasized that awareness of breathing often made the difference between endurance and disaster. Cold air constricts airways, exhaustion dulls sensation. Those who remained attentive to their own breathing patterns were better able to regulate body heat and avoid panic. You're doing that now without naming it. A faint wheeze reaches your ears. It might be you, it might be someone else. It is not alarming, just a reminder that lungs are working harder than usual. Cold thickens everything even air. Your thoughts drift briefly, touching a half dream. In it, you are underwater, breathing slowly, bubbles rising to the surface. The image dissolves as soon as you notice it. Dreams here do not hold. They slip away like breath in the cold. You adjust your head slightly, feeling the frost crackle and shift along your scarf. The sound is delicate, almost musical. It surprises you, this quiet evidence of cold at work. The room smells sharper now, less human, more mineral. Cold strips scent from the air. Smoke has vanished entirely. Sweat has dried. What remains is wool leather, and the faint tang of iron from tools resting nearby. It feels cleaner if harsher. Some later writers questioned whether people truly slept at all during nights like this, suggesting that what they experienced was closer to prolonged rest with intermittent consciousness. Lying here, you suspect that distinction matters less than outcome. Your body lowers its demands, it conserves, it waits. Your breathing slows further. The sting fades into something manageable. You've adapted again, another small lesson absorbed. Cold teaches quickly. Outside, the storm continues to rearrange the world, but inside, the rhythm of breath has become your anchor. Inhale, exhale. Each cycle confirms that you're still warm enough, still alert enough, still here. You allow your eyelids to settle, knowing they will lift again soon. Sleep does not claim you fully. It circles cautious, waiting for permission. You let it hover, letting rest seep in around the edges of awareness. Careful not to let breath or frost pull you too far under. Rest no longer arrives as a single event. It breaks itself into pieces, arriving in short intervals that feel measured rather than accidental. You begin to recognize the pattern without thinking about it. Close your eyes. Let the body soften. Wake again before the cold has time to settle too deeply. It is not something anyone taught you. It is something your body has decided on its own. Sleep tonight works in shifts. You drift under for a few minutes and surface again when a muscle tightens or a sound changes. Each return to awareness feels heavier than the last, but also strangely calmer. The initial edge of fear has worn down. What remains is focus. You're no longer wondering if the storm will end soon. You're simply managing the present. This way of resting was common during extreme winters, even if people did not describe it in those terms. Diaries and later interviews mention waking often to check fingers, toes, faces, and children. People did not trust long stretches of unconsciousness when temperatures dropped this far. The body needed supervision. You listen to your hands. They rest against your chest, now tucked inside layers, fingers loosely curled. You flex them gently. Sensation answers back, muted but present. That is enough. You let them be. Nearby, someone shifts position, the movement careful and slow. You feel the shared warmth change slightly, then settle again. No one speaks. There is no need. Everyone understands the same unspoken rule. Stay warm, stay aware. Do not waste energy. A memory surfaces of people taking turns staying awake during storms, even when alone. Cowboys later described propping themselves upright for a few minutes at a time, letting sleep come and go in waves. Awareness passed back and forth with exhaustion, like a watch that never fully ended. You're doing the same thing now, even if you are not alone. Your mind drifts into a shallow dream. In it, you are walking across a frozen field, counting steps to stay awake. Each number echoes softly. The dream fades when you reach 10. You wake with a faint start heart, steady but alert. You adjust your shoulders, easing tension that has built while you slept lightly. Muscles stiffen when held too long in one position. You loosen them slowly, resisting the urge to stretch fully. Big movements feel reckless now. The cold feels different during these waking moments. It presses more clearly against your skin, reminding you why vigilance matters. When sleep takes you again, it softens. You begin to understand why this cycle works. Waking renews awareness. Sleeping conserves energy. Together they form a rhythm that carries you through the night. Some accounts from this winter mention people counting breaths or heartbeats to keep themselves from drifting too deeply. Others focused on small physical tasks like wiggling toes or pressing fingers together. These habits were not superstition. They were ways to stay connected to the body. You try counting now quietly. 1 inhale, 1 exhale, 2, 3. The numbers slow your thoughts. They give your mind something gentle to hold. Outside, the storm continues its steady work. The sound has flattened into a constant presence, neither rising nor falling much anymore. Snow has filled gaps, sealed edges. The wind has fewer places to enter. This helps and hurts at the same time. Less wind means less heat loss, but also less fresh air. You stay alert to the balance. Your eyelids close again. This time sleep holds for a little longer. Images come and go without urgency. A fence line, a dark shape moving through snow, a hand reaching out. None of them linger long enough to become troubling. You wake again with a small ache in your neck. You roll your head slightly, easing it to one side, then the other. Relief spreads slowly. You breathe out and settle again. Later observers would note that people who survived nights like this often remembered them not as dramatic, but as strangely methodical. There was little room for panic. Panic burned energy too fast. Instead, there was repetition. Check, rest, wake, adjust, repeat. You're living inside that pattern now. Your body feels heavier with each cycle, but also more practiced. You know where to tuck your hands, how to angle your face, how long to let sleep deepen before pulling back. These decisions happen without conscious thought. The night stretches on, but it no longer feels endless. It has shape now, divided into these small, manageable pieces. You take another one, eyes close, breath slows. Awareness fades just enough. When you wake again, it is with the quiet certainty that you have made it through another interval. Not through the storm, not through the night, just through this small span of time. And for now, that is enough. You notice the warmth before you think about it. It is not your own. It arrives as a subtle change along your side, a gentle pressure that was not there before. Something large shifts nearby, and the air around you moves differently, heavier, carrying a faint animal smell that cuts through wool and smoke. A horse has been brought close. You do not open your eyes, but you know the sound. The slow stamp of a hoof. The quiet snort, controlled and low. Horses understand storms in a way people admire and borrow from. They turn away from wind instinctively. They conserve energy without being told. When they are frightened, they become still. During severe winters on the plains, it was not unusual for people to shelter animals indoors or as close to living spaces as possible. Barns leaned as even enclosed porches became shared refuges. Body heat mattered more than separation. This practice saved lives on both sides of the arrangement. The warmth from the animal is not dramatic. It does not flood the space. It radiates slowly, steadily, a living heat source that does not burn oxygen or smoke. You feel it along your back, a difference of just a few degrees, but enough to relax a muscle you had not realized was clenched. The smell is strong but reassuring. Hay, sweat, leather tack dampened by breath. It anchors you in the present. This is not a dream. This is a practical decision made by someone who understood what cold can do. You shift slightly to take advantage of the heat, careful not to startle the animal. Horses spook easily, especially in unfamiliar spaces. This one stands quietly, sides rising and falling in a slow rhythm. You find yourself matching your breathing to it without meaning to. People who lived through this blizzard later spoke about how animals often sensed shifts in the storm before humans did. Restlessness, stamping, changes in breathing. Whether this was true awareness or simply coincidence is hard to untangle. Still, many trusted those signs, using animals as living barometers in a world where instruments froze and failed. You feel calmer now, not safe but steadier. The horse's presence changes the atmosphere of the room. Fear softens at the edges. Shared warmth does that. It reminds you that survival is not always solitary. The floor vibrates faintly as the animal adjusts its stance. Snow crunches somewhere outside to distant muffled sound. The storm continues, but inside this small pocket life has clustered together. There are stories from this winter of cattle brought into schoolhouses of sheep, herded into churches of chickens sleeping under beds. These accounts are sometimes told with humour, sometimes with disbelief. Living through it, you understand there was nothing humorous about the decision. It was necessity, plain and simple. You press your hands closer to your chest, feeling warmth linger a little longer now. Sensation returns slightly to your fingers. Not enough to feel comfortable, but enough to reassure you that circulation has improved. You flex them once slowly. The horse exhales a long breath that sends warm air drifting across your shoulder. You almost smile. It is an oddly intimate thing, sharing breath with another creature in the dark, trusting each other not to move too suddenly. Later interpretations differ on how widespread this practice truly was. Some suggest it was rare, limited to the most desperate situations. Others argue it was far more common than records indicate, simply underreported because it felt ordinary at the time. Either way, the logic is clear when you feel the difference yourself. Sleep comes a little easier now. Not deeper, but smoother. The cycles stretch slightly. You drift longer before waking. When you surface again, it is not with alarm, but with quiet awareness. You remain careful. Animals can kick. They can shift suddenly. You do not forget that. But you trust this one, at least for now. Trust is another kind of warmth. Your thoughts slow drawn into the steady rhythm of breathing beside you. Inhale, exhale. The horse's flank rises and falls, a dark shape you sense more than see. You feel smaller next to it and strangely protected. Outside, the blizzard owns the land. Inside, heat has been negotiated, shared, borrowed. You allow yourself another interval of rest longer this time, supported by an animal that understands standing through storms better than anyone. You sleep lightly warmed not by fire but by life itself, waiting for the next moment when awareness will return and the night will ask something new of you. You wake with your cheek pressed against something that was never meant to be a pillow. It is firm, slightly uneven, smelling faintly of dust and old grain. For a moment confusion flickers, then memory settles back into place. You're curled into a space that was never designed for sleep. A barn corner, a storage room, a dugout carved hastily into earth, somewhere meant for tools or animals or supplies repurposed by weather into a refuge. The horse nearby shifts again, hooves scraping softly. The sound vibrates through the floor and into your bones. You welcome it. Noise means movement. Movement means life continuing. Barns were never warm places, but they offered something priceless during storms like this. Space without windows. Thick walls of timber or packed earth. Hay bales stacked high, trapping air, turning open rooms into pockets of insulation. People learned quickly that sleeping near stored feed was often warmer than sleeping near walls. You feel the ground beneath you cold but stable. Earth holds temperature better than air. Even frozen, it does not fluctuate as wildly as the open night. Dugouts took advantage of this, burrowed into hillsides' roofs heavy with sod and snow. They were dark, damp and claustrophobic, but during blizzards they could mean the difference between enduring and disappearing. You draw your knees in again, tucking yourself into the smallest possible shape. Someone nearby is doing the same. You feel the shared heat shift slightly, then settle. There is a faint sound of breathing, steady and controlled. It comforts you more than words would. Personal journals from settlers describe nights spent sleeping upright against barn walls, backs pressed into hay heads tucked down to protect ears and necks. Lying flat was not always possible. People slept sitting, kneeling, leaning, whatever position allowed the body to stay warm and supported. Sleep adapted itself to the space available. Your neck aches from holding its angle too long. You adjust carefully, easing the strain. Relief spreads slowly like warmth from a small ember. You breathe out, letting your shoulders drop. The smell of hay is strong now. Dry, dusty, faintly sweet. It catches in your throat when you inhale too deeply. You keep breaths shallow, letting the air warm before it reaches your lungs. Dust feels like a minor problem compared to cold, but it still matters. Outside, the wind scours the landscape, but here inside, this rough shelter sound behaves differently. Everything feels closer. Small noises echo softly. A shifting boot. A cough quickly stifled. The quiet feels crowded, full of unseen presence. Some later accounts mention people hollowing out snowbanks and sleeping inside them using snow itself as insulation. It sounds counterintuitive until you understand how snow traps air. Those shelters were fragile and dangerous, but in certain conditions they held warmth better than exposed buildings. Survival demanded creativity. You think about the choices that led people here. Who decided to stay put? Who tried to reach the next town? Who misjudged distance? Those decisions were made quickly, often with incomplete information. The storm did not allow for careful planning. It rewarded speed and punished hesitation. Your fingers tingle faintly as circulation improves near the horse's warmth. You flex them once slowly. Sensation answers back, dull but reassuring. You tuck your hands deeper into your sleeves. The space feels crowded now, though you cannot see most of it. Bodies press close, separated by blankets, coats, hay tools. Privacy has dissolved. No one minds. Modesty freezes quickly in weather like this. There are stories of people sleeping beside wagons turned on their sides, wheels half buried, canvas flaps weighted with snow to block wind. Others describe crawling under overturned sleighs or into culverts. These were not comfortable solutions. They were available ones. You adjust your position again, finding a spot where the ground presses less sharply into your hip. The movement sends a faint ripple through the group. Someone sighs softly, then settles again. The shared space absorbs the motion and returns to stillness. Later retellings of the blizzard often focus on dramatic rescues and heroic journeys. Those moments existed, but they were rare. Most survival happened in places like this, quiet and cramped, marked by long hours of waiting rather than action. People lived through the storm by enduring boredom, discomfort, and fear all at once. Your eyelids droop again. Sleep returns cautiously, testing whether conditions will allow it. You let it come, trusting the small improvements you have gained. A little warmth, a little stability, a little more air moving where it should. You drift into a shallow dream where the barn stretches endlessly, hay bales forming walls like a maze. You walk through it slowly, never reaching the end. The dream fades without resolution. When you wake again, the cold has not worsened. That feels like progress. The storm outside continues, but it has not found a way inside this shelter. Not yet. You breathe, counting softly in your head. In, out. The rhythm steadies you. The horse exhales again, warm air brushing your sleeve. You adjust closer without touching, respecting the unspoken boundary between human and animal. Here in this borrowed space, sleep becomes possible again. Not deep, not restful, but enough. Enough to keep you going. Enough to carry you forward into the next stretch of night where the storm still waits and the world remains buried, but you are for now alive and resting inside walls that hold. You wake to the sound of something cracking, sharp and dry like glass snapping underfoot. For a split second, your body tenses ready to react before you realise the sound came from very close to you. Someone has shifted a food sack. The contents inside have frozen solid. Hunger announces itself quietly in weather like this. It does not roar, it nudges, a hollow feeling under the ribs, a faint lightness in the head. You're aware of it now, sitting patiently at the edge of your awareness. There is food nearby, you know that. You also know it will not be easy to eat. Cold changes food in ways that feel almost hostile. Bread turns rigid, meat becomes wood hard, fat grows opaque and brittle. Anything with moisture locks itself into a shape that resists teeth and fingers alike. You reach slowly for the nearest bundle, finger-stiff movements careful. Someone passes you a piece of something wrapped in cloth. You do not need to see it to know what it is. Salt pork maybe, hardtack, a heel of bread saved for just such a moment. You hold it close to your body first, letting what little warmth you have soften it even slightly. Eating cold food burns energy. Warming it even a little is worth the wait. Accounts from the time note that people often slept with food tucked inside coats or beneath blankets during severe cold, not for comfort, but to keep it from freezing completely. Butter was carried in pockets. Bread was crumbled and pressed flat to warm faster. Hunger made people inventive. You bring the food to your mouth and bite carefully. The sound is loud in the quiet space, a brittle crack followed by slow chewing. Your jaw works harder than usual. Each bite feels deliberate. You savour it, not for flavour, but for what it represents. Energy, heat, continuation. The taste is muted by cold, but salt still cuts through. It wakes your mouth sharp and grounding. You chew slowly, letting it soften before swallowing. Swallowing itself takes effort. Throat muscles feel sluggish, reluctant. You focus, willing the food down. Nearby, someone coughs softly, then clears their throat. Eating sends dust into the air. Hay and flour mix with breath. You keep your mouth covered between bites, breathing through your nose as much as possible. Survivor recollections often mention that people underestimated how much energy cold demanded. Calories that felt sufficient on ordinary days vanished quickly in sub-zero temperatures. Those who rationed too tightly weakened fast. Those who ate whenever they could often lasted longer, even if supplies ran low sooner. You feel that truth now in the way your body responds to even a small amount of food. Warmth spreads faintly through your chest, subtle but real. It is not comfort, it is function. Your hands feel marginally more responsive. The ache behind your eyes dulls. You pass the remaining food along. Sharing happens without ceremony. No one knows how long the storm will last. No one wants to be the reason someone else falters. In these moments, fairness is instinctive. The cold does not pause while you eat. It presses in steadily, reminding you that food is only one part of survival. You tuck your hands back inside your sleeves, fingers curled, holding onto the last of the warmth the meal provided. There are stories from this winter of people melting snow in their mouths to relieve thirst, careful not to swallow too much cold at once. Others held ice near lips, letting it soften before taking it in. Dehydration mattered even in blizzards. Dry air pulled moisture from breath faster than people realized. Your mouth feels dry now, salt lingering. You resist the urge to scrape snow from somewhere and eat it. Cold water steals heat. Instead, you swallow carefully, letting saliva do its work. Eating has fully awakened you. Your senses sharpen again. You listen to the space around you. The horse shifts. Snow slides somewhere outside. Wind murmurs along the walls. The night continues its slow progression. Later discussions among historians suggest that food availability played a crucial role in determining who survived prolonged storms. Not just the quantity, but the type. Fat-rich foods mattered. Protein mattered. Sugar, when available, was precious. You do not analyze this now. You feel it. Your stomach settles, no longer hollow. Hunger retreats satisfied for the moment. You adjust your position, easing back into stillness. The act of eating has cost energy, but it has also restored it. The balance feels acceptable. Sleep does not return immediately. Your body remains alert, warm just enough to notice its surroundings more clearly. You wait, breathing steadily, letting digestion do its quiet work. Eventually your eyelids grow heavy again. You tuck your chin, nestle into the layers around you, and allow rest to approach once more. The cold remains. The storm continues. But you have fed the fire inside your body small and steady, and for now, that is enough to carry you into the next stretch of night. You notice the clothing before you notice anything else. Not how it looks, but how it behaves. Fabric has become a kind of language in this cold, telling you what it can and cannot do. Wool bends reluctantly. Leather barely moves at all. Cotton feels wrong the moment it touches skin, holding cold like a grudge. You shift slightly and feel seams press into your side. Every stitch matters now. Clothing is no longer decoration or modesty. It is equipment. It tells a story of who planned ahead, who improvised, and who is learning too late. Out here, people layered with intention long before fashion entered the conversation. Wool shirts worn inside out so seams would not rub raw skin. Coats patched again and again, not for appearance, but because each patch stopped wind from finding a new path inward. Buffalo robes were treasured, heavy and awkward, but unmatched for holding heat. Those who had them slept better even in storms like this. You feel the weight of your own layers pressing down, comforting in their density. Hat pulled low, scarf stiff with frost, coat collar rubbed smooth from years of use. None of it matches, none of it was brought together, and yet it works imperfectly stubbornly. There is a faint rustling sound nearby as someone adjusts their clothing too. You hear the soft scrape of fabric against fabric, the careful movements meant to avoid drafts. No one undresses fully. No one would dare. Even loosening a coat too much feels risky. Heat escapes fast once given permission. Letters written after the winter mention how people slept fully dressed for weeks, sometimes months, until spring softened the nights again. Boots stayed on. Belt stayed buckled loosely to keep coats closed. Buttons mattered. Missing ones were replaced with twine leather strips, whatever held. You test your boots by flexing your ankles. The leather resists stiff as board. Laces bite slightly into your shins. It is uncomfortable, but boots trap heat and protect circulation. Bare feet on frozen ground would steal warmth in minutes. You're grateful for the ache. There is a faint smell of wet wool in the space, not unpleasant, just heavy. Wool carries scent differently than cotton. It smells like animals and earth and work. It reminds you that this fabric came from living things, once shaped now to keep other living things alive. People who endured this blizzard later described how clothing sometimes froze into shape overnight. Sleeves that stood on their own. Coats that had to be warmed slowly before they could bend. It sounds almost comical, until you feel how stiff your own collar has become. You press your chin down again, tucking skin away from air. Ears are vulnerable, nose too. You have learnt this quickly. Exposure does not announce itself loudly. It whispers first, then numbs. There is disagreement in later retellings about how well prepared most settlers truly were. Some accounts emphasize resilience and foresight, describing closets full of wool and hides. Others point to shortages, poverty and optimism that assumed winter would behave as it always had. The truth likely sits between those stories, uneven and personal. You look down at your hands, or at least imagine doing so. Gloves cover them, mismatched fingers worn thin. You ball them into fists and then relax them again, slow and deliberate. Sensation answers back. Still there. Still yours. A quiet realization settles in. Clothing is not passive tonight. It is active. It works, or it fails. It protects, or it betrays. Every choice made months ago, every trade, every repair, every saved scrap of fabric has led to this moment. You think of those who tried to travel light, who left coats behind to save weight, who trusted movement over insulation. Some made it, many did not. The storm punished exposed skin with speed that felt unfair. Sleep approaches again, gentler this time. Your body recognizes that the layers are holding, at least for now. You allow yourself to sink slightly, muscles loosening without fully relaxing. The weight of clothing anchors you, reminding you where you end and the cold begins. You drift into a shallow dream where garments hang in a line, stiff as boards clacking together in the wind. You reach out to touch one and wake instead, hand resting against your chest. The storm continues outside, indifferent to wool and leather and human planning. But inside this careful arrangement of layers, you have bought yourself another stretch of rest. Clothing holds your warmth close, tells its quiet story, and lets you sleep on, wrapped not in comfort, but in survival. The silence arrives so gradually that you do not trust it at first. You notice it only because something familiar is missing. The constant scrape of wind against walls has softened. The sharp whistles have faded into a low, distant hush. Snow still falls, you know that, but it does so gently now, as if the storm has decided to lower its voice. Silence in this weather feels dangerous. You listen harder, straining to understand what the quiet means. Snow has a way of swallowing sound when it piles high enough. Drifts absorb noise, turning the world into something padded and unreal. The absence of sound does not mean safety. It often means burial. Your ears ring faintly in the quiet, a soft internal sound that reminds you how long you've been listening for danger. You shift your head, and the frost in your scarf crackles softly, startling you in the stillness. Even small noises feel amplified now. Outside, the land has changed shape completely. Snow has erased edges, rounded corners, filled spaces that once echoed. Fences are no longer lines, but gentle humps. Paths have dissolved into blankness. This quiet is the sound of a world being smoothed over. People who later ventured out after storms like this often described how disorienting it felt. Familiar landmarks vanished. Distances lied. Sound behaved unpredictably, sometimes carrying fat, sometimes not at all. Snow created a false calm that tempted people to move too soon. You stay where you are. The horse nearby shifts again, hooves muffled by hay and snow. Even that sound feels distant, softened. The animal exhales a warm breath that you feel more than hear. You focus on that, letting it ground you in the present. Your own breathing sounds loud to you now. You slow it slightly, not wanting to disturb the fragile quiet. It feels as if the space itself is listening. There are accounts from this blizzard of people mistaking silence for the storm's end and stepping outside only to lose direction within moments. Snow-blinded wind picked up again, without warning, and the quiet revealed itself as a trap. Those stories travelled later as warnings passed carefully from one winter to the next. You imagine opening the door and seeing nothing but white, no sky, no ground, just endless sameness. The thought tightens your chest. You remain still, choosing patience over curiosity. The quiet changes the way your thoughts move. Without constant noise to react to, your mind drifts inward. Memories surface uninvited. A summer sound, wind through grass, the clink of tools on a warm day. You let these memories pass without clinging to them. Too much contrast makes the present hard to bear. Your fingers feel colder now that the storm has eased its voice. You flex them gently. Sensation returns slowly, like something waking reluctantly. You tuck them back into sleeves, restoring balance. Snow slides softly from somewhere above, a muted thump that startles you despite its gentleness. It reminds you that weight still presses down on the roof, on walls, on the world itself. Quiet does not mean lightness. Some later interpretations suggest that the psychological impact of silence after extreme storms was as challenging as the noise that preceded it. People reported heightened anxiety, a sense that danger had gone invisible rather than gone away. Sitting here, wrapped in layers, you understand that feeling without needing it explained. Your eyelids grow heavy again. The quiet encourages sleep, but you resist sinking too deeply. You have learned caution. Silence can hide as much as it reveals. You let yourself rest lightly, breath shallow but steady, ears attuned to any change. A shift in wind, a new sound, anything that breaks the stillness. The snow continues to fall, soundless and persistent. The world outside is being remade inch by inch, quietly, thoroughly. Inside, you wait alert in the calm, aware that silence in a blizzard is never empty. It is full of weight of possibility of snow settling where it will remain long after morning arrives. You rest in that awareness, eyes closed, listening to nothing and everything at once. Sleep returns wearing unfamiliar shapes. It does not arrive as darkness or rest, but as images that slide into place without warning. You're still here, still cold, still aware, yet the edges of the room soften and something else begins to overlap the present. Dreams do not stay obedient in weather like this. You drift into one without realizing it has started. In it you're walking across the plains, but your feet never touch the ground. Snow moves beneath you like water flowing instead of falling. You try to speak and hear nothing. The wind has taken sound away entirely. The dream feels calm at first, almost beautiful, until you notice that you cannot stop moving. You wake with a quiet intake of breath, heart steady but alert. The dream dissolves instantly, leaving only a faint unease. Your body has not moved. The cold has not changed. Only your mind travelled. People who lived through this winter often described dreams that felt more vivid and more intrusive than usual. Exhaustion blurs the boundary between waking and sleeping. Hunger sharpens images. Cold seeps into thought itself, reshaping it. Nights like this pull imagination closer to the surface. You lie still, letting the feeling pass. Panic wastes energy. Dreams cannot hurt you unless you follow them. Your thoughts feel sluggish now, as if they're moving through thick air. This is another sign you've learned to recognize. Fatigue has reached a deeper level. You respond by sitting up just slightly enough to change posture and bring awareness back into the body. Blood shifts, sensation sharpens a fraction. Sensation. Nearby someone murmurs softly, caught in their own half-dream. The sound fades quickly, swallowed by the quiet. No one responds. Everyone understands that waking someone fully would cost more than it gives. You focus on the present again. The weight of your coat, the steady warmth at your back, the smell of hay and wool. These details anchor you more effectively than memory or thought. There are accounts of people mistaking dreams for reality during this blizzard, believing they had reached shelter when they had not, or thinking someone had called their name. Whether this was cold-induced confusion or simple exhaustion is hard to separate. Either way, those moments proved dangerous. You keep this in mind, now trusting your senses only when they agree with one another. Your breathing deepens slightly, then steadies. You let your eyelids close again, but you do not surrender fully. You hover close to waking, allowing images to pass without pulling you in. This time the dream is quieter. You're sitting beside a fire that does not give off heat. It glows without warmth, beautiful and useless. You understand the meaning immediately, and wake again, a faint smile tugging at your mouth, despite the cold. Even dreams are teaching you now. Your muscles ache in a slow, dull way. It is not pain that demands attention, but the kind that reminds you how long you have been holding yourself together. You adjust your shoulders again, easing strain, careful not to open gaps in your layers. The night feels older now. Time has thickened. You sense that hours have passed, though you cannot say how many. The storm outside has not announced any ending. It continues its work quietly. Sleep circles again, persistent but cautious. You let it come closer this time, trusting the balance you have maintained. Your body knows how to wake itself if something shifts too far. You allow rest to deepen just a little more. Images flicker behind closed eyes, softer now, less demanding. Snow becomes light, movement slows, the dreams lose their edge. You remain wrapped in layers, breathing steadily, letting sleep take what it can without claiming you entirely. In this fragile truce between cold and consciousness, even uneasy dreams serve a purpose. They remind you that your mind is still active, still working, still alive. You drift there, balanced between worlds, while the blizzard holds the land outside in silence and snow, and the night continues to test how gently it can let you rest. You wake to the closeness of other people in a way that feels different from before. Not tighter, not louder, but more deliberate. Bodies have shifted during the night, inching closer without discussion, following warmth the way plants follow light. Proximity has become instinct, not social choice. Someone's shoulder rests near yours. Another person's boot presses lightly against your calf. The horse stands just far enough away to share heat without crowding. No one apologizes. No one moves away. In this weather, closeness is not intimacy. It is arithmetic. The space feels smaller now, not because more people arrived, but because the cold has compressed everything. Air feels heavier. Movement feels slower. Even thought seems to travel shorter distances before settling. You listen to breathing. Several rhythms overlap slightly out of sync, forming a soft, uneven pattern. It reminds you of waves breaking at different points along a shore. This sound reassures you more than silence ever could. As long as people are breathing, the night has not won. In storms like this, community formed quickly and without ceremony. People who might never have spoken before shared space, food and heat without naming it as kindness. Survival erased formal boundaries. You feel that erasure now. There is no sense of ownership over space, only shared use. You notice how children sleep differently nearby. Smaller bodies curl tighter heads, tuck down breaths shallow but steady. They adapt faster, conserving warmth with an ease adults envy. Many who lived through this winter later remarked on how quietly children endured nights like this, learning patience before they learned fear. Your own body feels stiff when you shift slightly. Muscles protest after hours of holding the same posture. You move just enough to ease the ache, careful not to disturb the fragile arrangement around you. Someone exhales more deeply, then settles again. The group absorbs the change. The smell of the room has changed. Less smoke, more wool, more animal. It is not unpleasant, just dense. Shared air carries shared presence. You breathe through it calmly, trusting that freshness will return when it is safe. People who wrote about this winter afterward often mentioned how strangers became familiar without introduction. Names were unnecessary. Warmth mattered more. You sense that same temporary kinship now. If the storm lasts another day, these people will feel known in a way that outlasts memory. You flex your toes inside your boots. Sensation answers slowly. Still there. Still responsive. You tuck your feet closer to your body, reclaiming what warmth you can. The quiet returned again, but it feels different than before. Not ominous, not deceptive, just settled. Snow has done much of its work. Drifts have built themselves into walls. The storm has spent some of its force reshaping the land instead of attacking it. You allow yourself to relax slightly. Not enough to forget where you are, but enough to let tension drain from your shoulders. Shared warmth makes this possible. Alone you would not dare. Your thoughts wander briefly to the idea of morning. You do not picture light or warmth. You picture movement. Shovels scraping. Doors opening with effort. Voices testing the air. Morning means work, not relief. For now the night continues. You rest inside this temporary community stitched together by cold and necessity. Breathing overlaps. Heat accumulates slowly. The storm waits outside, but it has not broken through. You close your eyes again, letting rest return in its cautious way. Not alone, not afraid. Just present, sharing space and warmth with others who understand without words that closeness is how people survive nights like this. You notice the children before you notice how quiet they are. Not silent exactly, but contained. Their breathing is shallow and regular, their movements rare and economical. They sleep the way animals do in cold, folded inward, conserving everything. It strikes you that they have learned something important without being taught. A small body shifts nearby no more than a few inches, then goes still again. The movement is careful, instinctive. There is no restless tossing, no searching for comfort that does not exist. Children adapt faster than adults tonight, not because they understand the danger better, but because they accept the conditions more readily. Those who later wrote about this winter often remarked on this with surprise. Children who struggled through ordinary hardships sometimes endured the blizzard with remarkable calm. They learned quickly which movements hurt and which helped. They learned stillness as a skill. You watch a child's breath fog faintly in the dim air, then disappear. The rhythm is slow, deliberate. No wasted motion. You find yourself matching your own breathing to it, borrowing that quiet efficiency. Adults tend to fight discomfort. They remember warmth too clearly. Children accept cold as a present fact, not a loss. That acceptance saves energy. It also saves sleep. Someone has wrapped an extra blanket around the smallest among them, not tucked in neatly, but layered in a way that traps air. The blanket is patched thin in places but doubled and folded where it matters. Care shows itself differently here. It is practical, quiet, unsentimental. There are stories from this blizzard of children sent ahead during brief lulls, small bodies able to move through drifts that trapped adults. Other accounts tell of children carried wrapped inside coats, protected at all costs. Memory and record do not always agree on these details, but they agree on one thing. Children were central to decisions, not afterthoughts. You feel a protective instinct rise unexpected and strong. It tightens your chest more than the cold does. You push it down gently, not because it is wrong, but because it cost energy. Care must be expressed through action later, not emotion now. A child sighs softly in sleep, a sound so small it barely disturbs the air. It reminds you how fragile bodies can be and how resilient at the same time. The cold does not choose its targets, it takes what it can. Survival tonight is not about strength, but about attention. You adjust your position slightly to block a draft reaching toward the children. The movement is subtle, almost unconscious. Someone else does the same from another angle. No one coordinates this. It happens because everyone feels the same thing. Later reflections on this winter often point out that families who stayed together fared better than those separated by circumstance or choice. Warmth multiplies when shared. Awareness spreads. Someone always notices when another stops moving too much or too little. Your muscles ache again, a reminder that stillness has its cost too. You roll your shoulders just enough to ease tension, then return to quiet. The children do not stir. Their bodies have found equilibrium. You think about how this night will be remembered by them, if at all. Not as a story with dates and names, but as a sensation. Cold, dark, breathing. A feeling of being held close by people who did not speak much. Sleep finds you again, drawn by that calm. It is lighter than before, less troubled by images. The presence of children changes the quality of the space. It demands steadiness. It encourages restraint. You let your eyes close, trusting the shared vigilance of the group. Someone is always half awake, someone always listening. The night continues, but it does so around this small circle of quiet bodies, learning stillness together, waiting for morning to make itself known. The storm has learned your thoughts by now, or at least it feels that way. Fear no longer arrives as a spike. It circles instead, patient and quiet, slipping into moments of stillness when your guard is down. You notice it not as panic, but as a tightness. Behind the ribs, a question that does not form words. What if this lasts longer? You do not chase the thought. You acknowledge it, then let it sit without answer. Cold nights teach restraint. Worry burns energy just as surely as shivering. You breathe slowly, deliberately, letting the question fade back into the background where it belongs. Your mind wanders in loops touching the same concerns from different angles. Warmth, air, time. You notice how each worry feels physical before it feels emotional. A knot in the shoulders, a pressure behind the eyes, a faint tremor in the hands. Fear lives in the body first. People who survived storms like this later described how their thoughts narrowed as the night wore on. Big plans vanished. Long-term thinking became impossible. Survival reduced itself to the next check, the next breath, the next adjustment. You are there now, living inside that narrowing without resistance. You press your tongue gently against the roof of your mouth, a small grounding habit. The sensation pulls you back into your body. Here. Now. Breathing. A soft whimper escapes someone nearby, quickly stifled. It is not pain. It is the sound of a thought slipping into a dream and pulling emotion with it. No one reacts. Everyone understands. Night brings those sounds. They pass. The dark feels thicker than before, as if fear has weight. You imagine it settling like snow piling up silently. The thought almost amuses you. Even fear behaves like weather in this place. There are reports from this winter of people hearing voices that were not there, convinced someone had called for help just beyond reach. Some followed those sounds and vanished. Others stayed put and survived. Exhaustion blurs the line between imagination and perception. You remind yourself of this gently, not as a warning, but as reassurance. If you hear something strange, you will wait. Waiting is safer. Your heartbeat feels loud in your ears. You place a hand over your chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath the layers of cloth. The heart does its work without complaint, faithful and unassuming. You draw comfort from its persistence. You notice how fear softens when shared. The closeness of others dulls its edge. Breathing overlaps, heat pools. Awareness spreads across more than one mind. You are not carrying this alone, even if no one speaks. The storm outside continues its steady pressure, but it no longer feels personal. Earlier it felt like an adversary. Now it feels more like an environment, something to exist within rather than fight. That shift changes everything. Your thoughts slow again. The tightness in your chest loosens a fraction. You have learned something important tonight. Fear does not need to be defeated. It needs to be managed, like cold, like hunger, like sleep. You adjust your posture once more, easing into a position that balances warmth and circulation. The movement feels practiced, now familiar. Your body remembers what works. Sleep approaches not as an escape, but as a tool. You let it come, cautiously aware that it will bring images and fragments, but trusting yourself to surface again if needed. As your eyes close, the last thought you hold is simple. You're still here. The night is still moving. That is enough. Darkness stops behaving like a backdrop and becomes a responsibility. You realize this slowly without alarm. Night is no longer something you pass through while sleeping. It is something that must be managed, watched, respected. The absence of light feels active, as if it could do harm if ignored. Someone is awake. You can tell by the way breathing changes. One rhythm remains steady while others drift deeper. Awareness has shifted hands without anyone saying so. This is how it works now. The night watches itself. You open your eyes just enough to take in the space. Shapes exist only as suggestions. A shoulder, a knee, the curve of the horse's flank. Everything else is swallowed by shadow. Vision is less useful than sound. You listen instead. A small noise travels through the dark. Snow settling, wood contracting. A faint scrape that could be a boot shifting or hay compressing under weight. You catalogue each sound not with fear but with attention. Attention keeps the night from surprising you. During winters like this, people rarely slept all at once. Someone always stayed half alert even when exhaustion pressed hard. Sometimes it was intentional. Sometimes it happened naturally when sleep refused to settle fully. The result was the same. There was always a witness. You feel the pull of sleep tug at you again. It would be easy to let go completely. The body wants that. The mind wants it too. But you hold yourself just short of surrender, maintaining a thin thread of awareness. Your thoughts drift to the idea of light. Not sunrise, but firelight, candlelight. The smallest glow that reminds you of edges and boundaries. You understand now why people conserved candles so fiercely during storms. Light reassures. It gives shape to fear. No one lights anything tonight. Flame draws oxygen. Flame demands attention. Darkness, for all its unease, costs nothing. You place a hand against the ground, feeling its cold steadiness. The floor does not move. It does not change its mind. That consistency calms you. You rest your palm there for a moment longer than necessary, grounding yourself in something solid. Your ears catch a change in the horse's breathing. A deeper exhale, a slight shift of weight. Animals rest in layers, two alternating between alertness and release. You trust that if the horse reacts sharply, it will wake you faster than any thought. There are stories of people counting hours through storms, by how many times someone stirred the fire or checked the door. Time was not measured by clocks, but by actions. Tonight time is measured by breaths and listening. You allow your eyelids to close again, but you keep listening. Sound travels differently when eyes are shut. It feels closer, more personal. Each noise carries more meaning. The night stretches. You do not know how long it has been dark or how long it will remain so. That uncertainty no longer troubles you as it did earlier. You have learned how to exist without answers. Someone exhales sharply, then relaxes. A hand adjusts a blanket. The group shifts almost imperceptibly, like a single organism finding better position. No one speaks. Words would break the fragile balance. You notice that fear has thinned. Not vanished, but softened like snow packed down by repeated footsteps. It is still there, but it no longer trips you with every movement. Familiarity has dulled its edge. You remain awake a little longer than before, letting others rest more deeply. This feels right, even if you cannot explain why. The night has given you this task and you accept it. Eventually sleep returns careful and light. You let it take you, trusting that someone else will surface if needed. The watch passes quietly without ceremony. Darkness continues its work outside, but inside it has been claimed, managed, shared. You rest within it, knowing that the night is being watched even as you drift away. You wake expecting something to have changed, and when it has not, the realization feels heavier than surprise. Light filters in, weakly, not bright enough to be called morning, not warm enough to offer comfort. It seeps through cracks and seams, pale and indistinct, turning darkness into a dull grey that reveals very little. Morning has arrived without improvement. The cold remains firm, settled into the space as if it belongs there now. Your breath still fogs. Your fingers still move slowly. The storm has not lifted its weight, only adjusted its grip. You feel that truth immediately before you think it through. Someone nearby sits up, carefully testing joints that have stiffened overnight. The movement sends a ripple through the group. Others stir, not waking fully, but acknowledging the shift in time. Daylight changes expectations. It brings the idea of action even when action feels impossible. You lift your head slightly and feel the protest in your neck and shoulders. Muscles ache from holding tension too long. You roll them, gently easing stiffness without opening yourself to drafts. Relief comes slowly, like warmth spreading from a small ember. Outside sound returns in pieces. A distant groan of wind. The muted slide of snow settling. The storm is still there, but its voice has changed again. It feels tired, as if it has spent much of its force during the night. That does not mean it is finished. People who stepped outside during this blizzard often described how daylight made conditions look safer than they were. Visibility improved just enough to invite movement, but not enough to guide it. Snow disguised depth. Wind erased tracks within minutes. Daylight tempted people into danger. You stay where you are. The horse shifts again, reacting to the change in light. Animals notice morning even when it brings no warmth. The animal lowers its head breath, steaming, then settles. You take comfort in that calm. Your stomach reminds you of itself again, not urgently, but persistently. Energy from the night's food has carried you through sleep. Day will require more. You know this, but you do not rush. Eating too quickly in cold steals warmth. Everything must be done slowly. Someone cracks the door just a fraction enough to look out without letting wind pour in. Light spills across the floor, revealing packed snow piled almost to the frame. The door closes again immediately. No one speaks, but the message is clear. Travel is not yet possible. Accounts written later often note how hope surged briefly at first light only to fade when conditions became clear. Morning promised relief by habit, not by fact. This was one of the hardest lessons of the storm. Time alone would not save anyone. You draw your hands closer to your chest, feeling circulation return slowly. Sensation creeps back into fingertips with a faint sting. It hurts just enough to reassure you. The group settle again, shifting from night vigilance to daytime waiting. This is a different kind of endurance. Staying still when light suggests movement requires discipline. You have learned that discipline now. You close your eyes once more, not to sleep deeply, but to rest where you can. Morning exists outside, pale and cold. Inside, survival continues exactly as it did in the dark. Morning brings work with it even when the world outside remains unusable. You feel that expectations settle into the room as people begin to move with more intention. Not faster, not louder, just purposeful. Night was about endurance. Day asks for effort. You sit up slowly, testing each movement before committing to it. Your hands feel clumsy, fingers reluctant to obey. You rub them together gently, feeling friction build heat in a way that shivering never quite does. Sensation returns in uneven waves, prickling and sharp, then dull again. Someone reaches for a tool and stops flexing their wrist before lifting it fully. Metal has turned hostile in the cold. It steals warmth on contact-biting skin if touched carelessly. You wrap cloth around anything you must handle even briefly. Gloves stay on no matter how awkward they make fine movements. Outside shovels scrape faintly against snow as a few people test the drifts near the entrance. The sound travels strangely softened and distorted as if the air itself resists carrying it. Snow has packed itself dense and heavy, not the light powder people prefer to imagine. Each scoop takes effort. Each lift burns energy. Those who kept notes during this winter often mentioned how tools failed them. Handles snapped, metal cracked, hinges froze solid. Even simple tasks demanded improvisation. People learned to work by feel rather than sight, listening for resistance, watching breath stopping before exhaustion took over. You kneel to adjust a strap on your boot and feel the cold seep through layers to your knee. The ground bites immediately. You rise again, choosing discomfort over numbness. Standing conserves circulation better than kneeling. Every posture matters. Hands are the first problem. They always are. Fingers stiffen quickly, losing dexterity before strength. You rotate your wrists, curl and uncurl, fingers keeping blood moving. Tasks are done in short bursts, followed by rest, then another attempt. Efficiency replaces speed. Someone brings in a shovel blade rimmed with ice, holding it away from skin. Another person chips ice from a latch using the handle of a knife, rather than the blade-saving sharpness for when it truly matters. Small decisions like these accumulate into survival. You notice how quiet everyone is. Conversation costs breath. Breath costs heat. Communication becomes brief, purposeful, often silent. A nod replaces a sentence. A gesture replaces explanation. There are memories passed down from this winter of people injuring themselves, not from the storm directly, but from pushing too hard afterward. Frostbitten fingers shattered by impact. Muscles torn in cold that refuse to bend. The cold punishes impatience. You move slowly, respecting limits. The horse shifts again, reacting to activity. Animals sense change before people name it. You glance toward it, noting its posture, calm, balanced, still conserving. You take that as guidance. Snow removal progresses inches at a time, enough to keep exits clear, enough to allow air to move, not enough to attempt travel. The goal is maintenance, not escape. You rest again, leaning against a wall, feeling your breath steady. Work in cold is not continuous. It comes in waves. Push, pause, warm, repeat. This rhythm keeps the body from tipping too far in either direction. As daylight crawls higher, revealing little more than white and grey, you understand something quietly. Morning has not rescued you. It has simply changed the kind of work required to keep going. You accept that without resentment. You settle back into stillness tools, nearby hands warming slowly inside sleeves. The storm waits. The world remains buried. And you prepare patiently for the next small task the day will demand. Voices begin to matter in a different way now. Not for conversation, not for news, but for rhythm. Someone starts speaking quietly, not to be heard across the room, but to be heard by the people closest. The sound cuts through the cold more gently than movement ever could. It is a story, or maybe just the shape of one. Details blur. The point is not accuracy. The point is wakefulness. You listen without turning your head. Words arrive slow and steady, paced carefully so breath is not wasted. The voice is low, almost flat, as if emotion has been set aside to conserve energy. That restraint makes it soothing. It gives your thoughts something to lean against. Storytelling has always done this work. Long before nights like this, people used shared words to hold back sleep when sleep felt risky. A voice becomes a hand on the shoulder, reminding you that time is still moving, that you're not alone inside it. The story wanders. A memory of a summer drive. A misplaced tool found weeks later. A fence built crooked and left that way because it worked well enough. Small things. Ordinary things. That is what makes them effective. They anchor you to a world that exists beyond snow and cold. You feel your body respond. Eyes open a little wider. Breathing evens out. The fog in your thoughts thins. The voice is doing its job. Others add a sentence here and there, not interrupting, just extending. One detail prompts another. The rhythm builds not louder but fuller. No one laughs. Smiles are unnecessary. The goal is not entertainment. It is steadiness. People who endured long winter nights often mention this practice later, not as storytelling exactly, but as talking for the sake of staying upright. Words replaced movement when movement was too costly. Voices took turns keeping the room awake. You notice how carefully everyone speaks. No one rushes, no one raises their voice. Speech is shaped to the conditions like everything else. Even language adapts. Your hands feel warmer now, blood moving again as attention shifts away from discomfort. You flex your fingers, slowly encouraged by the change. You keep listening. The story reaches a natural pause and another begins without comment. Someone recalls a place they once worked. Another mentions a meal remembered in detail. Food stories come easily and cold. They bring heat to the imagination even when the body remains chilled. There is a moment when the voices fade and silence threatens to return. Someone notices and clears their throat, offering another line, another memory. The group accepts it gratefully. Silence has its place, but not here, not yet. You think about how these stories will be remembered later, if they are remembered at all. Probably not as stories, more as the feeling of them. The sound of human presence layered gently over a dangerous quiet. Your eyelids droop again, but this time you resist sleep more actively. You let the voice pull you back, using it as a guide. Staying awake is easier when attention has somewhere to rest. There are moments when the voice falters, when breath runs short. The speaker pauses, drinks a careful sip of air, then continues. No one rushes them. Patience stretches time in useful ways. You add a small comment yourself, a single sentence, nothing important. The sound of your own voice surprises you. It feels rougher than you expect, as if unused, but it steadies you too. Participation changes the way wakefulness feels. You're no longer just enduring, you're contributing. The horse shifts again, reacting to the change in sound. Animals recognize calm in voices. The animal settles reassured. Its quiet presence supports the room just as the voices do. As the stories continue, you feel the night move forward another small distance. Not enough to promise relief, enough to matter. Eventually the voices taper naturally. Fatigue returns heavier, but less threatening. The purpose has been served. Awareness has been renewed. No one announces an end, it simply happens. You let your eyes close again, knowing you can open them easily if needed. The voices linger in your thoughts, gentle and grounding. Sleep edges closer, but it does not overwhelm you. In this way, words replace blankets, stories replace motion, and the night is carried forward not by strength or speed, but by shared attention. You rest inside that, breathing steadily, letting the storm remain outside, while human voices quietly hold the dark at bay. Luck announces itself quietly if it announces itself at all. You notice it not as relief, but as the absence of something going wrong. The roof has not shifted. The walls have not given way. No one has slipped into dangerous stillness. These small mercies accumulate without ceremony, easy to overlook if you're not paying attention. You lie there, breathing, aware that nothing you did alone brought you this far. Skill mattered. Attention mattered. But chance has been woven through every hour of the night, threading itself into decisions large and small. Who reached shelter in time? Who found others instead of being alone? Who happened to have one more layer, one more match, one more meal? People later like to describe survival as earned. It makes the story cleaner. Hard work rewarded, preparation vindicated, and often that was true. But nights like this resist tidy explanations. Two people could make the same choices and meet different ends. Snow shifts, wind changes, a stumble happens or does not. You think about that without bitterness. There is no energy for it. Accepting uncertainty costs less than fighting it. Your body feels heavy now, not just with fatigue, but with a kind of settled awareness. You have adjusted to the cold as much as one can. You know where to tuck your hands, how often to move, when to rest and when to stay alert. These are skills you did not have yesterday. You have learned them quickly because the night demanded it. Someone nearby whispers a brief observation. The wind sounds lower. The snow seems packed harder. The comment is not hopeful or fearful. It is simply noted. Information shared without expectation. You nod though no one may see it. Acknowledgement matters. It keeps the group oriented in the same reality. There are accounts from this winter of people crediting survival to toughness alone, but quieter recollections mention something else. Timing, a door that opened, a neighbour who checked one more time, an animal that stayed calm instead of bolting. These moments do not fit neatly into lessons, but they linger. You feel a small ache in your hip where pressure is built. You shift, carefully easing it, redistributing weight. Relief comes slowly. Your body thanks you with a steadier breath. Outside, the storm holds its shape. It has not ended, but it has settled into itself. The wild violence of earlier hours has given way to persistence. This is often when people make mistakes, mistaking endurance for safety. You do not move, you wait. Your thoughts drift briefly toward those who did not find shelter. You do not dwell on it. Dwelling serves no one. But the awareness is there, quiet and heavy, reminding you that survival is unevenly distributed. The horse exhales again, warm air brushing against your sleeve. The animal remains calm, balanced, conserving. You mirror that instinct. You realize that if someone were to ask you how you survived this night, you would struggle to answer. You would mention layers, shared warmth, staying still, listening. But you would know those words only tell part of the story. The rest lives in moments too small to name. You let that realization settle. It doesn't frighten you. It humbles you. Sleep returns again, not because conditions are perfect, but because they are stable enough. You allow it, trusting the pattern you've built. Wake, check, adjust, rest. As your eyes close, you hold one simple thought. You're still here, not because you mastered the storm, but because you moved through it carefully alongside others, with a measure of luck you didn't control but respected. That thought carries you gently into another shallow stretch of sleep, while the blizzard waits outside, patient and indifferent, and the night loosens its grip by a small but meaningful amount. Names surface softly, now spoken without ceremony, not announced, just mentioned in passing, folded into conversation the way you might mention the weather on a normal day. Someone wonders aloud whether a neighbour made it inside somewhere. Another recalls seeing a lantern far off before the snow closed in. These thoughts move carefully, as if raised voices might disturb anything fragile. Loss is handled gently here. You feel it as a tightening in the chest rather than a rush of grief. There is no space for full emotion yet. Survival has kept it contained, packaged neatly for later. Right now, people speak in fragments, acknowledging absence without insisting on conclusions. Someone says a name and pauses. No one answers. The pause stretches, then releases. That is enough. No one pushes further. In cold like this, certainty is rare and speculation costs warmth. You listen aware that these names will matter more when daylight truly arrives, when travel becomes possible, when the storm loosens its hold and questions demand answers. For now, memory does the work, quietly holding space without resolution. In storms like this, people learn to speak carefully about those not present. Not out of superstition, but practicality. Hope remains useful until it clearly is not. Premature grief drains energy needed elsewhere. Your own thoughts brush against faces you know or think you know. You picture them briefly, then let the images fade. The mind understands when to retreat. The air in the room feels heavier now, not with smoke, but with shared awareness. Everyone knows that survival has not been evenly distributed, even if no one has confirmed it yet. That knowledge settles into the space like snow, quiet and unavoidable. You shift slightly, easing tension from your back. Someone else does the same. The group adjusts, accommodating the weight of unspoken understanding. There are recollections from this winter of people discovering losses days later, long after the storm had passed. Roads reopened slowly. Communication returned in fragments. News arrived unevenly, sometimes softened, sometimes sudden. Nights like this were the waiting ground for those revelations. You notice how voices remain low. No one jokes now. The earlier stories serve their purpose. The night has moved on. Attention turns inward again, toward endurance rather than distraction. Your breathing deepens, slower and steadier than before. You have settled into this space emotionally as well as physically. The sharp edge of fear has dulled. What remains is resolve. Outside, the snow continues its slow work, covering tracks, smoothing evidence, reshaping the land. The storm does not distinguish between the living and the dead. It simply moves. You think briefly about how memory will work later. Which moments will be remembered? Which names will surface first? Which details will be lost entirely? History is built from these uneven fragments, shaped by who remains to tell them. For now, memory rests alongside you, quiet and patient. You close your eyes again, not to escape, but to conserve. Grief can wait. Questions can wait. The night still requires attention, and you have learned to give it what it asks. Sleep comes gently, thinner than before, but steadier, carrying you forward without demanding too much. You rest among others who understand the weight of names spoken softly, and the necessity of holding them lightly until the storm allows more. The weather has taught you more in a single night than years of ordinary days ever could. You feel that lesson settle into your body as much as your mind. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive with clarity or pride. It arrives as a quiet understanding, the kind that stays with you long after details fade. Cold is not just something you endure, it instructs. You've learned how little the body truly needs to continue. Heat in small amounts, movement in careful doses, attention spread across hours instead of moments. You have learned that stillness can be active, that waiting can be work. People who lived through this winter carried these lessons forward whether they meant to or not. Later storms were met differently, clothing chosen with more care, travel delayed more readily, shelter valued over speed. The land didn't change, but people did, shaped by nights like this one. You feel the imprint of that shaping now. Even as exhaustion weighs on you, awareness remains close. You notice drafts before they chill too deeply. You sense when it is time to move and when it is time to remain still. Your body has begun to cooperate with the conditions instead of resisting them. Outside, the storm no longer feels like an opponent. It feels like a force that exists regardless of you. That shift in perception brings a strange calm. You're not fighting the blizzard, you're living inside it. Your breath is steady. Your heartbeat even. These simple facts matter more than any plan. You check them the way you might check the horizon on a clear day. Everything that matters is close at hand. There is a faint sound from beyond the walls, not wind this time, but settling. Snow compressing under its own weight. A slow, almost gentle adjustment. The land is finding a new shape. It will take time to recognize it again. You think about how people will talk about this storm later. Some will focus on numbers, temperatures, losses. Others will tell stories shaped by memory and emotion. Neither will fully capture what it was like to lie here breathing carefully, measuring sleep in minutes, listening to snow move. What stays with you is not the scale of the event, but the intimacy of it. The way cold pressed close, the way people gathered without being asked, the way ordinary actions became essential. You shift slightly, easing a cramp before it deepens. The movement feels practiced, now precise. You have learned how to move without waste. Nearby, someone stirs, then settles again. The group remains intact. That fact brings relief you do not question. Togetherness has become part of the environment, as necessary as walls and coats. The horse remains calm, breathing slow and even. Its presence continues to anchor the space. Animals do not imagine futures, they respond to what is. That simplicity has guided you through the night more than once, your thoughts slow, further smoothing out. The sharp edges of concern have softened into something manageable. You're tired deeply, so but not undone. The lesson of this night is not courage in the dramatic sense. It is adaptability. It is the willingness to accept conditions as they are, and respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. You have done that again and again without needing to name it. Sleep approaches with a different quality now. It feels less like something to guard against and more like a resource you can use carefully. You allow it to deepen a fraction more than before, trusting the stability you have built. As you drift, you hold one final thought. Weather does not test character the way stories suggest. It tests habits. Tonight you have learned new ones. You rest inside that understanding, letting it carry you forward as the storm continues outside, no longer a mystery but a reality you know how to live within. Memory begins its work even before the storm is finished. You notice it happening in small ways. Certain sensations settle deeper than others. The sound of wind against wood, the weight of layers pressing down, the way breath looks when it turns briefly visible then disappears. These details attach themselves to you quietly as if they intend to stay. You realize that this night will not fade the way ordinary nights do. Even now, as you lie still, your mind selects what to keep. It does not choose the loudest moments or the most frightening. It chooses what was repeated. The rhythm of breathing, the careful movements, the shared silence. Repetition hardens memory the way cold hardens earth. People who lived through this winter often carried fragments of it for the rest of their lives, sometimes without understanding why. A sudden dislike of open spaces in snow, a habit of checking doors twice before sleep. an instinct to keep extra blankets close even on mild nights. The storm did not end when the weather cleared. It settled into behaviour. You feel the beginnings of that settlement now. Even if warmth returns tomorrow, something in you will remain cautious. You will listen differently. You will measure comfort against safety. The night has recalibrated your sense of normal. Your body shifts slightly, responding to a small ache. The movement is automatic, practiced. You barely think about it. That awareness has become part of you too. You no longer need to remind yourself to protect fingers or ears. You simply do it. Outside, the storm continues its slow transformation of the land. Snow packs tighter. Wind reshapes drifts into forms that will persist long after footprints vanish. When people step outside again, the world will feel unfamiliar, even hostile in its smoothness. Memory will be needed to navigate it. You think about how stories will be told later, simplified for listeners who are not here. They will mention courage and loss. They will describe cold in numbers. But they will not easily convey what it felt like to wait through darkness, learning patience minute by minute. That understanding belongs only to those who endured it. You notice how calm you feel now despite everything, not relieved, not joyful, just settled. The storm has taken away excess thought. What remains is essential. Someone nearby sighs in sleep, a deep sound that suggests true rest, if only briefly. That feels like progress. You allow yourself a similar release, letting your shoulders drop fully for the first time. The horse shifts again, steady and unbothered. Animals remember storms too in their own way. You imagine this one months from now, reacting to the first sharp wind of another winter body, recalling without thought. Memory lives in muscle as much as mind. You close your eyes again, letting sleep come a little deeper. Not careless, just more trusting. You have learned the boundaries of this space and you respect them. As you drift, images form without urgency. Snow falling, light filtering weakly, hands working slowly. These are not dreams so much as impressions settling into place. The storm outside continues, but it no longer feels dominant. It feels like part of the story that has already been absorbed. You've adapted to its presence and in doing so changed yourself. You rest there aware that memory is already shaping what this night will become in the telling. You do not resist that process. You let it happen, breathing steadily, allowing the experience to set, knowing that when warmth returns, this quiet imprint will remain guiding you long after the snow is gone. Stories move faster than weather ever does. You understand that now, even before the storm has finished loosening its grip. Long before roads clear or fences reappear, words will begin travelling outward, carried by whoever can walk, ride or speak again. The blizzard will outrun itself through rumour. You lie still and think about how this night will sound once it is told instead of lived. Someone will describe the cold with wide eyes. Someone else will exaggerate the wind. Another will swear the snow reached higher than it possibly could have. None of them will be lying exactly. Memory stretches to fit meaning. You hear someone nearby murmur about a place farther east, where conditions might have been worse or better or just different. No one knows yet. News will arrive unevenly, fragment by fragment, shaped by distance and fear. For now, speculation fills the gaps where information cannot reach. This is how storms become legends, not through precision but through repetition. You imagine how the blizzard will be named, argued over, measured against other winters. Numbers will be attached to it later. Temperatures, death counts, livestock losses. But the stories people carry will not use numbers. They will use moments. A door that would not open. A fire that went out. A voice heard in the dark. You think about how some of those stories will travel far beyond the plains, reaching places where snow is an idea more than a threat. Listeners there will shiver in warm rooms trying to picture cold that bites and waits. They will not fully succeed, but they will try. Your own story, if you tell it, will be quieter. You will talk about waiting, about breathing, about how close people stood without speaking. You will struggle to explain why that mattered so much. The horse shifts again, steady as ever. Animals will not tell stories about this storm. They will simply remember it in their bodies. In that way, their memory is more honest than any account. You feel tired in a different way now, less raw, more settled. The night has worn you down, but it has also smoothed something inside you. Fear has been replaced by familiarity. The storm no longer surprises you. Outside, the wind lifts slightly, then falls back. The sound is softer than before, as if it has already begun to retreat. You do not trust it fully. Storms have a way of returning when attention wanders. Still, the change is noted. You close your eyes again, letting another short rest take you. Thoughts drift toward how people will compare this blizzard to others, arguing over which was worse, which came first, which mattered most. Those debates will continue long after snow melts. What cannot be debated is how it felt to be here, breathing carefully, counting warmth. You rest inside that truth, knowing that while stories will race ahead, the real experience stays anchored in this moment. Quiet, cold, endured. By now you can feel the difference between what the storm is doing and what people will later say it did. That gap opens quietly without drama. It lives in the space between sensation and summary, between lying here, breathing carefully, and the numbers that will someday be printed on paper. You sense that this night will not settle neatly into agreement. Even now, while snow still presses against the walls, interpretation has already begun. Someone nearby murmurs that it cannot possibly have been colder than last winter. Another shakes their head, certain they have never felt air like this before. Both statements feel true to the people who hold them. Cold is not measured only by temperature, it is measured by exposure, by expectation, by how long it stays. You think about how later people will argue in warm rooms over which reports were accurate, which thermometers froze, which journals exaggerated, which memories softened over time. Some will insist the storm was sudden and merciless. Others will claim it announced itself for days. The disagreement will not be resolved because experience rarely aligns itself into a single shape. Lying here, you understand something simple. The storm you lived through is not the storm that will be remembered. Outside, the wind lifts briefly, stirring snow into motion again, then settles. That small change draws attention immediately. Someone lifts their head. Another shifts position. Awareness ripples through the group without words. Even disagreement pauses when conditions change. You listen carefully, separating sound from meaning. The wind is present but less aggressive. Snow still falls, but not with the same urgency. These observations matter more than any later conclusion. They inform what you do next, how much you move, how deeply you rest. Your body responds automatically. You adjust layers, you tuck hands, you breathe slowly. You do not wait for consensus. People who documented winters like this often disagreed afterward, not because they were careless, but because no two people experienced the storm in the same way. One slept near animals, another stayed alone. One moved constantly, another stayed still. The cold treated each body differently. Memory followed suit. You feel your own experience settling into a shape that feels solid even if you cannot fully explain it. You will remember the sound of snow against wood more than the wind. You will remember breathing more than fear. Those details will become your truth regardless of what others claim. The horse shifts again, unbothered by debates that have not yet begun. Animals live in immediate fact. Cold, shelter, breath. They do not revise later. You envy that simplicity briefly, then realize you have adopted some of it yourself. You no longer speculate about what might have happened if you had chosen differently. Those thoughts have fallen away. What matters is what is happening now. Your muscles ache less sharply than before. The pain has dulled into something manageable. That change feels important. It suggests endurance. It suggests that the night has moved past its hardest edge even if danger remains. You think about how people will later compare this blizzard to others, stacking winters against one another like cards trying to decide which one deserves the title of worst. You imagine those conversations drifting far from this place, losing detail as they travel. The arguments will continue, they always do. What will not travel as easily is the feeling of lying still for hours, listening for changes, learning patience by necessity. That knowledge stays close to the body. It does not explain itself. Someone near you exhales deeply and shifts into a more comfortable position. That movement feels like a small victory. You allow yourself a similar adjustment, careful and controlled. Comfort increases by degrees so small they would never register in a story, but they register here. The storm continues outside, reshaping itself slowly. It does not need agreement to exist. It does not care how it will be described. It moves according to its own rules. You close your eyes again, letting rest deepen slightly. Not because you believe the danger has passed, but because you recognize stability when it arrives. Stability is enough. As you drift, you accept that this night will fracture into many versions once it's over. Some will be louder, some will be simpler, some will be wrong in ways that do not matter. Yours will remain quiet, anchored in sensation rather than argument. You sleep lightly, breathing evenly, holding on to the version of the storm that belongs to you alone, knowing it will not need defending later. Sleep returns differently now. It no longer feels like a risk that must be managed minute by minute. It feels cautious, respectful, as if it understands the ground rules you have established together through the night. You allow it in without resistance, trusting yourself to surface if something shifts. Your body is still tired, deeply so, but the exhaustion has changed texture. Earlier it was sharp and demanding. Now it is heavier, slower, like a blanket laid gently over your thoughts. You sink into it carefully, aware of where your limits are. The cold remains, but it no longer advances. That alone feels significant. You can feel the boundary where warmth holds thin but steady. Fingers remain responsive. Breath remains smooth. The ache in your joints has settled into a dull presence rather than an urgent complaint. Someone nearby shifts into deeper rest, their breathing lengthening. Another person follows, then another. Sleep spreads through the group in waves, not all at once, but gradually like snow, settling after wind dies down. You sense when it is your turn to go deeper. You think briefly about how rest itself changes after a night like this. It becomes lighter, more alert, as if part of you remains awake even while sleeping. People who live through severe winters often mention that they never slept quite the same afterward. Nights became something to listen to rather than disappear into. You feel the beginning of that change now. The horse lowers its head muscles, relaxing further. That movement reassures you more than any thought. Animals do not pretend. If it were dangerous to rest more deeply, the horse would tell you. You allow your breathing to slow. Inhale, exhale. The rhythm carries you forward gently. Your thoughts drift without urgency, touching memories and letting them go. Snow, breath, voices, heat shared. All of it blends together into something quieter. Outside, the storm has shifted into persistence rather than force. Snow still falls, but it no longer demands attention every second. That subtle change allows the body to release some of its tension. You feel it happen in your shoulders first, then your jaw. You rest deeper now, not unconscious, but unburdened. Awareness remains close enough to wake you if needed, but far enough to let your muscles loosen fully. This balance feels earned. The idea of morning no longer feels distant or abstract. It feels possible. Not comforting, not easy, but real. That knowledge settles in without excitement. You do not rush toward it. Your body drifts into a longer stretch of sleep, one that holds for more than a few minutes at a time. When you surface briefly, it is without alarm. You adjust once, then sink back again. Rest has returned, changed, cautious but reliable. You accept it as it is, knowing that this new version of sleep will stay with you long after the snow melts. It has learned from the storm just as you have. You sleep on lightly but steadily, breathing even held by layers, by shared warmth, by the quiet understanding that the hardest part of the night has passed. You wake without urgency, and that alone tells you something has changed. Not warmth, not safety, but pace. The night is no longer pressing forward with the same insistence. It has loosened its grip just enough for you to notice. The space around you feels settled. Bodies remain close, but no longer drawn inward as tightly. Breathing is deeper, more confident. The horse stands quietly, weight balanced, no longer shifting in restless calculation. These small signs register before thought does. Your body understands them first. Outside, the wind has thinned to a distant presence. Snow still falls, but softly now, without the sharp edge that demanded constant attention. The storm has not ended, but it has moved on to another phase 1 that allows stillness without penalty. You stretch a finger inside your glove and feel sensation answer back immediately. That small response feels like a quiet victory. You flex toes. They respond as well. Nothing dramatic, nothing miraculous, just function returning where it held through the night. Light filters in again, pale and diffuse, illuminating the texture of snow packed against walls and doors. The world outside remains difficult, but it no longer feels actively hostile. It feels paused, waiting. You sit up slowly, careful not to rush the transition. Blood shifts. Muscles complain briefly, then settle. The ache you feel is ordinary now, not alarming. Ordinary discomfort is a gift after a night like this. Someone near you lifts their head and looks around. Another follows. There is no celebration, no relief expressed aloud. Survival does not need commentary. It simply continues. You think back over the night not as a sequence of events, but as a sensation. Cold managed, fear contained, sleep negotiated. These are not moments you will recount easily, but they are moments that have shaped you. Outside, the snow lies smooth and deep, reshaping the land into something unfamiliar. Fences will need digging out. Paths will need finding again. Life will resume, but altered. You already feel that adjustment beginning inside you. You draw in a slow breath, letting it fill your lungs fully for the first time without hesitation. The air is cold but clean. It carries no threat now. You exhale long and steady. The night has passed, not vanished, not forgotten, but completed. You remain still for a moment longer, letting that realization settle gently. There will be work soon. Decisions, movement. But not yet. For now, you allow yourself to exist in the quiet after white, listening to a world that is no longer shouting. You rest there present and awake, holding the calm that follows endurance. You do not need to hurry now. The storm has said what it needed to say, and you have listened long enough. The cold that once demanded constant attention has softened into background presence, something you can acknowledge without reacting to. Your body knows this. It loosens gently, muscle by muscle, breath by breath. You imagine the snow outside settling for the final time, drifting into shapes that will last until someone disturbs them. The world feels hushed, wrapped in its own stillness. Nothing asks anything of you in this moment. Your breathing slows naturally, in and out, each cycle smooth and even. The night no longer needs to be watched. It has moved on. You let your thoughts drift without direction. There's no need to review what happened or plan what comes next. Those things will wait. Right now you are allowed to rest without guarding the edges. If your eyes close, they do so easily. If they remain open, the quiet does not demand attention. Either way is fine. Either way is safe. The memory of cold fades into distance, no longer sharp enough to disturb you. What remains is the warmth you borrowed, the steadiness you learned, the patience that carried you through. You sink gently into rest, knowing that the hardest part is already behind you, and that nothing is required except this calm, this slow breathing, this quiet release. Sleep comes softly now without effort. Sweet dreams,